Our speaker today, Matt Ivester, is a Silicon Valley technology entrepreneur who creates pioneering products that have significant impact, as some of you will talk about later, both this book and his earlier work. I was sent a draft, not a galley proofs, essentially, of this book, and I was asked if I would blurb it. And I said, I don't know this guy. I mean, why should I do this, and so forth. And I started reading it, and I kept reading it, and I finished the book, and in spite of myself, and it's very well written. But as a parent, I said, I wish I'd had this book when my two boys were younger, because I think it would have given them a better appreciation of the permanence of things that happen online. And then I began to think, I said, well, this might be something that professors and teachers as well as students should know about the nature of online identity in today's very odd and topsy-turvy world. So Matt's going to talk about that. And let me just say, he's a grad student up at Stanford and getting his MBA. And he was recently named the Director of Digital Citizenship for the entire student body. And he and I chatted a little bit about that upstairs, and I'm going to ask him maybe to say a few things about that toward the end of his presentation. So Matt has agreed to talk for about 20-25 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to questions. So I'm delighted to welcome Matt to the Annenberg School. I think this is the first time you've been in this building.
That's right.
Campus a couple of times.
Yeah.
But welcome to the Annenberg School.
Thank you.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction and for inviting me here today. I'm excited to be able to talk with all of you about this book and some of the learnings that I've had over the past few years, and how I think they can be applicable to everyone, but especially in the context of a college campus. And I'm hoping that this can be just kind of a casual conversation, and if there are questions, initially I think I'll try to get through some of the content and then hold your questions till the end, but I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions, and we can talk about anything you want. So if you want to talk about Juicy Campus, we can. If you want to talk about online reputation stuff, we can. Cyberbullying. It's open, but I thought what students are typically most interested in is the online reputation management stuff. And so I thought I'd go through just a little bit about why that's important and what are some of the things that are best practices that everyone should be doing. So to kind of understand why it's important, I thought I'd ask the students in the room to raise your hand if you Googled your roommate before you found out, before you came to campus. Yeah. So that looks like almost all the students raised their hand, and that's exactly what we would expect. Today's first impressions are made online, and that has important implications because it means that it's no longer about making a first impression by looking the person straight in the eye and giving them a firm handshake when you meet them. It's already happened, and you don't get to control it. You don't get to see what's happening. You don't know what they're judging you based on necessarily unless you're controlling your online reputation carefully. So there's two main psychological reasons that your first impression really matters. The first is called first impression bias. And first impression bias basically says that the information that you find out about someone first, you're going to weight more heavily than information you find out later. The second psychological factor is negativity bias. And that one basically says that negative information that you find out about someone is going to be weighted more heavily than good information. And research has shown that it's at about a ratio of 5 to 1. So that means for every piece of negative content that someone finds about you online, you need to have 5 pieces of positive content just to get back to neutral. So who cares more broadly? How is this going to impact your life is a question that I think a lot of people ask me. And there are 2 statistics that, while I was doing research for the book, I was really surprised by. The first is that 24% of college admissions officers, both undergraduate and graduate, are checking applicants' Facebook pages. And so a lot of students don't realize that their Facebook page may have an impact on their college admissions and even their graduate school admissions. And kind of related to that, 70% of employers have admitted to having rejected a candidate based on information that they found out about that person online. So 70% have admitted to rejecting a candidate. That means an even higher percentage are Googling information about candidates as part of their process. So making a strong first impression may be the difference between getting a job and not. And I'll give you an example from a New York Times article that was written last year about a college senior who was in the job process. And the firm that he was applying to hired a company called Social Intelligence to run a background check on him. And what Social Intelligence does is not a normal background check. They run an online background check. And what they're looking for are any sort of red flags. And so what ended up happening was this student on his Facebook page had liked a page 5 years before when he was in high school. He had liked a page called "I Shouldn't Have to Press 1 for English. This is America." And so what Social Intelligence ended up sending to that employer was a report that said match criteria, racist or discriminatory tendencies. And that's it. That's all it takes for that kid to get dinged. And he didn't get an explanation of why he wasn't continuing in the process. Employers typically aren't going to tell you why they don't want to continue interviewing with you. They have no obligation to do so. And they have enough applicants, especially in this economy, that they don't need people who have any sort of red flags like that online. And this is something that the student hadn't even thought about for years since he had pressed that like button on Facebook when he was in high school. And if the article hadn't have been written, he would have never known that that was even out there. He would have never even thought of it, because he wasn't actively managing his online reputation. So when I start telling these kinds of stories to students, often the reaction that I hear is, okay, well, then I'm just going to shut down my Facebook page. I want to get off the internet. And I try to tell them that that's not the right way to go. One, because it's not really possible. Even if you shut down your Facebook page, don't write a blog, don't do Twitter, other people are still going to create content about you. They're going to post pictures of you. They're going to mention you in newspaper articles. There will be other people who might have your same name who might create confusion around what is about you and what is not. So it's actually not really possible to go offline entirely. And more than that, there's a lot of benefits to being online. So the right answer is to actually not shy away from your internet presence, but to build it up and really actively manage it. So in the go big or go home kind of world, I always say you've got to go big when it comes to your online presence. And that has a lot of benefits. First is, of course, that sites like Facebook are inherently, they're fun, they're social, and there's a lot of just benefits into being on them for networking and socializing. But it's also defensive. So if someone, an angry ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, or later in your life when you're an employer, if you have to fire someone and they get angry, or whatever the case may be, you never know when someone might choose to attack you online. But if you have a strong online presence, and if you've been creating a lot of positive content about yourself online, and even neutral content, that can serve as a buffer so that it's less likely that the negative content gets seen by people who are searching your name later. So, and then the third reason is that making a positive impression online means that your first impression is going to be a good one, and you'll have the wind at your sails when you meet someone for the first time, instead of trying to fight against some negative impression, and then you're in an uphill battle, and that's never a good situation. So, some of the things that are important, I basically break it into 3 steps in the book. And the first is deciding what kind of content about yourself you're comfortable having online. The second is kind of curating all the stuff that's already out there. And then the third is how to think about each of those things going forward. And so I'll just briefly go into some of the highlights of each of those 3 steps. The most important things to think about when you are deciding what kind of content you want online are remembering that context matters a lot. And so while you may think that what you've posted is harmless or fun or funny, without the right context, it might be misinterpreted. And a lot of people have found this stuff out the hard way. An example I use in the book is, imagine a gay student who says something on his Facebook page like, OMG, this is the gayest Lady Gaga album yet. Well, all his friends know that he's gay, and so they will interpret that quite literally. They'll understand that he actually means she's singing some pro-gay lyrics, and this is great, and he's genuinely excited. What an employer might see would be different. What he or she might see would be that this is just another student using gay as a slur, and it's really, he or she might think that it's being used as a derogatory term. And so I would just say that keep in mind that your audience is broader than you might think. Context matters a lot. And that they may interpret things differently, and you don't have a chance to explain yourself. So just like that kid who the employer didn't call him up and say, hey, I saw this, are you really racist? You're not going to get a chance to have that conversation. Then the other thing you have to remember about what you're sharing online is how it's going to impact other people. And so a lot of the information that we share online feels like it's about ourselves, but it's also involves other people. And that's the nature of kind of social media right now. And so keeping in mind what is appropriate to share and what isn't about other people, and that where you draw your lines may not be the same as where someone else draws his or her lines. Once you have decided what kind of stuff you are comfortable having online, then it's time to kind of take a look at what's out there and clean up your content. And for a lot of students especially, they've been on Facebook for years. They've been creating tons and tons of content, and so this may seem like a really daunting task. But there are a few simple steps that are absolutely essential. The first is to take an online inventory. And that's as simple as doing a Google search of your name. If you want to get more sophisticated, then also do a Yahoo and a Bing search. Because even though most people are using Google, Google still only has about 70% of search traffic in the US, and that leaves another 30% of people who are going to use those other engines. If you have a common name, add things that employers are going to add. So they're going to take stuff off of your resume, and they're going to add your hometown or your school, and see what comes up on that list of results. It's really important that you know what especially is on the first page of results, because 85% of people don't go past the first page. So if you can have a great first page of results, that goes a long, long way. Then the next thing is pretty intuitive. Take down the stuff that is in your control. And so that means going through your Facebook photos, means going through your tweets, and that can be time-consuming, but it's well worth it. Then the next step is similar. It's to ask people who, if you've identified content that's out of your control that you would prefer not to have online, ask people to remove it. And if that's your friends, that's usually a pretty easy conversation. If it's someone else, it may be tougher. And the key is to know that most websites don't have an obligation to take stuff down. And so you should ask nicely. We had a lot of takedown requests when I was running Juicy Campus, as you might imagine. And we got a lot of them that were just incredibly mean and aggressive, and those ones did not usually get the content removed. Then the final step to think about is privacy settings, and really using your privacy settings. And there are a few things that means, but I'll talk about it in terms of Facebook because I think that's the most critical one for most people. Facebook has a system that's, you may have heard of Google Circles. Well, Facebook's got a system called lists where you can add all of your friends to different lists. And it might be that these are my high school friends, and these are my work friends, and these are my college friends. And you might be comfortable sharing different types of content with different groups. And that allows you to kind of split it out and segment your audience. But the two things that I tell everyone, Facebook made some recent changes, and there are two things that absolutely everyone must do on Facebook. And if you haven't done them, go home and do these two things. If you take nothing else from this presentation. One, they just gave you the ability to turn on profile review. And so a lot of people already may have turned this on, but if you haven't, this is the opportunity to accept or reject any piece of content that is associated with your profile. So if a friend posts you in a picture, it used to be that you'd get an email notification, and then you'd run home to check your computer and see if you looked good in that photo. But with profile review, you don't have to do that. It won't post to it won't be associated with your profile until you accept it. And that goes for text posts and videos as well. The second thing is to limit old posts. So remember how I said it can be really daunting sometimes for students because they've been creating content for so long? Well, Facebook realized this too, and they made it really easy. With the touch of a button, anything that's public that you've created in the past 5 years or however long you've been on Facebook will automatically be limited to just your friends. So that doesn't totally solve the problem, but it's a great first step. And the reason that doesn't totally solve the problem is that a lot of people are willing to accept friendship requests from complete strangers. So another step in the book is Unfriend the Randos. So all those random people, if you look at it and you can't figure out who they are, either move them into a list called Random Strangers. I don't know why I accepted them. And then be very careful what you share with that list, or just unfriend them. And there was a recent study that came out a few months ago, and it said that 20% of people were willing to accept a random stranger's friendship request on Facebook. Usually they were using very good-looking people, which helped that stat. But that means that 80% of people were not willing. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, yeah, I don't do that. I'm smarter than that. But what I would caution you is that your friends aren't. And so what I mean by that is that this same study found that that number jumped to 80% when there was a friend in common. And that is just something to be wary of. That just because you have a friend in common doesn't mean that you know the person, or even that the friend that is in common knows the person. So that's kind of how to think about prior content. I'll quickly go over a few things to think about when it comes to future content. And then I think I'll open it up for questions. Future content. One great thing that everyone should do that's totally free. On Google, you can set up an alert for your name. If you don't have a Google alert for your name, you should. Go to google.com/alerts. You type in your name or any other kind of identifying information that you want to get told about. And anytime, so Google, when they crawl the internet, they'll find new pieces of information and they will let you know as soon as they happen. And so that way you're not constantly having to Google yourself for new information. It's doing it for you and just emailing you when something new pops up that uses your name. A few more things to think about. Create as much positive and neutral content about yourself as you can. And what that really means is create profiles on sites like LinkedIn, and there are a lot of other social networks that let you create a profile and let you write a little biography, and that can say anything you want. You're in control of it, and no one else is adding to it. So that's your chance to put your best foot forward, and do it lots of times so that, as we talked about before, that content starts blocking attacks that might happen later. It makes it harder to find the negative content. So create positive and neutral content, and then cross-link that content. So your Facebook account, the way that search engines figure out what to rank first is they look at the quality of the links on the sites that are linking to that particular piece of content. So Twitter, for example, and Facebook have pretty high quality rankings, and if you link your Facebook page to your Twitter account, and your Twitter account to your personal blog, and your Google Plus profile to that same blog, etc., those are all more likely, because they're seen as relevant, because they're all about you, and high quality, to get pushed up higher in the search rankings. And that's, again, how you control your first page of results. And then the final thing I'd say is to claim your name. And I mentioned this in the book. Everyone, even if you don't want to ever tweet, get on Twitter and get your name as a username. And get on some of these other big sites and just claim your username so that other people aren't impersonating you. It's good, again, for search engine optimization, but it's also a defensive move. Yeah?
This is sort of a two-part question. The first part is relating to sites that are review sites. In other words, Yelp, with your Yelp, Angie's List, certain sites that are geared towards academic, teacher reviews, things like that. If your teacher review, for example, if there's a disgruntled student who just has it out for you, goes on one of these sites, puts up, "This is the worst teacher I've ever had in my life," and just smears you to pieces. How do you suggest combating that? And then the second part of this question is, have you seen in your research opportunities from a business standpoint for companies to start offering services as sort of cleanup services, like clean up your web presence?
Yeah. So, the first question, what do you do? I think, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think you're asking, what do you do if you have like a really angry student going after you on a teacher review site? Is that right?
Sure.
So the way that a teacher review site will generally operate is that it's all content created by third parties. So it's by students creating the content. And what that means legally is that the site itself is not liable for the content that the students create. So Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act says that an interactive computer service provider cannot be held liable as though they are the creator of the content on the site. And so what you will probably find is that you don't have a lot of luck going to the site itself and asking for the content to be removed. So what I would recommend instead is to get students that do like you to post a bunch of stuff so that that looks more like an anomaly than a fact. Unfortunately, that's typically all you can do. The other option, and I talk about this in the book, when you have a piece of content like that that a site won't remove, you have two options. The first is to sue, the second is to bury. And suing is expensive, and it doesn't always work, because a lot of times the stuff that people are upset about is opinions, and you're not generally going to be able to have those removed. So unfortunately, the best thing I can offer is that you should have people, students that like you, post really nice things about you. Your second point. Have you seen companies that are specifically out there to erase your history? Tons. So more and more, there's one clear leader right now, and that's Reputation.com. And but there are probably more than 100 companies that are trying to do this and offering these services. And what they're helping you with are exactly the same things that I just talked about, but a lot of people feel like they can't do it themselves, or if it's a particularly hard problem, or if there's a lot of negative content, they just want some additional help, and those services can do that.
In your opinion, are they successful?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, they're employing the same strategies. So what they will do for you is they'll write a bio and a profile, and they will publish it out on a bunch of different sites, and they'll cross-link that content. And so they're doing the same strategies, but it's just kind of a hand-holding, and a lot of people appreciate the extra help. Yeah.
Just make sure we're actually in the question section.
We're in the question session.
Do you think it's now reached a point of diminishing returns with social media in terms of Facebook and whatever? It seems like it's now the panopticon of fun versus something like Path, which is like, what is it, using Dunbar's number of 150 people that you have some strong social ties with, and that if they stumble over a link you do, or something you study, or something you find interesting, it's not necessarily something that would be used against you per se.
Is it safer to be interacting in a closed network like that?
I'm sorry, I got on a tangent there. Do you think we're moving away from a place where having a concrete persona online, an actual representation of you as a person online, is now a deleterious act, and then it's going to move away to either like closed, smaller networks or full-on anonymous networks, image boards?
So I don't think things are moving towards anonymity. I think more and more what the big companies are pushing is real identities. And so, that's been enabled a lot by Facebook Connect. And I talk about, in the digital citizenship part of the book, I talk about why anonymity can be problematic in terms of allowing kind of good people to engage in bad behavior online. So I don't think that that's generally where the trend is heading. I do see that social media companies and really the users of those companies are demanding an ability to control the privacy on those of their relationships on those sites. So that's why Google came out with Google Circles, and they want people interacting within a smaller subset of their friends that's more meaningful and more relevant. Same thing with Facebook lists. But the thing that I would caution students about is thinking that just because they're interacting in a smaller subset, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're safer. And what I mean by that, I think you said, if you share something on Path, maybe it's less likely to be used against you. And that's probably right generally. But one of the first case studies that I use in the book is the case of the Duke sex list. And this is a story about a young woman who was a senior at Duke, and as a joke, she put together a 42-page PowerPoint that listed 13 guys that she had slept with, and then went into great detail about their encounters. And I think one of the most interesting things about that story is that she sent it to only 3 of her friends by email. Then one of those friends forwarded it on, and then it got forwarded and forwarded, and then the whole Duke campus had seen it, and then be seen on other campuses, and not too long after, she was on the Today Show. And if you Google her name now, the first 5 pages are all about the Duke sex list. And that's what she will be known for a long, long time. So I hope that answers your question. I kind of went a few different ways.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it in terms of what I've studied and what I'm hoping to study in the future. I was looking at like the dark side of the internet. So everything that I'm interested in posting, I can't post to Facebook, even in terms of studies, because it's like, oh great, this guy looks like a demon on paper.
Yeah, this is a really, I think, one of the most important challenges facing academic institutions right now, which is how do you allow that space for experimentation and kind of intellectual rigor and creativity when you know that there's the possibility of being judged by outsiders, and especially, I mean, less so in the context of what one might choose to study, but more so in the context of in a college environment. I think we all expect people as part of the growing and learning process to make mistakes. And when those mistakes are being broadcast for hundreds or thousands of people to see, I think that makes students more conservative and less likely to engage in the behaviors that are really going to grow them the most, because they are afraid of making mistakes. And so I think somebody smarter than me, maybe somebody in this room, will solve that problem, but it's definitely a problem. Yeah.
You mentioned like once this negative content is out on websites, like the websites are unlikely to be taken down. So like what happened with Juicy Campus and with College ACB, for example, that caused those to kind of cross the line and get shut down?
So I don't know the College ACB story, but I can tell you about Juicy Campus.
Okay.
My comment earlier was that websites don't have a legal obligation to remove content posted by others. And so Juicy Campus wasn't shut down. We had, we were investigated by 2 attorneys general. We had literally hundreds of threats of lawsuits. But we were only sued by one company. And I won't say who, but it was for trademark infringement. And it had nothing to do with it had nothing to do with the content of the website. So it wasn't that Juicy Campus got shut down, but what did happen was that students and administrators and everyone that was involved with or affected by, I should say, the site, they were rightly upset by it. And anytime that we would have an advertiser post an ad, they would write into that advertiser and let them know that, hey, this is having a negative effect on our campus. And so what ended up happening was that we didn't have a sustainable business model. and it's expensive to run a website like that. And so advertisers didn't want to be a part of it, and the company eventually shut down. And I suspect that's what happened with College ACB. Yeah?
I'm just kind of wondering from the technical standpoint, especially on Facebook, if you have your profile under your privacy, set as only your friends can see everything, no one else, not even friends of friends, how do these employers get to your information, like, what you, unless they hire, some of these organizations you're speaking of. I've Googled myself, and then I found, maybe the third or fourth one will be Facebook, but when I've gotten in there, and I've asked someone to do it who's not my friend, I don't think that they've been able to see my information if I have that. And then my second question is, when you mentioned the profile review, should we turn that on or off?
On.
On. We want it on.
You want to be reviewing things before they hit your profile.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your first question, though, that's great that you've set it to just your friends, and so I think what you'll find is that employers actually don't have access to that. A couple cautions, though. So it's not that employers are somehow hacking into your Facebook account. If you've set it to just friends, then that's all that's going to be able to see it. But there is an advantage to sharing something about yourself more publicly. And so while you may choose to do it on other sites outside of Facebook, I think you do want employers to be able to find you online. And a lot of employers, what they're looking for are not just red flags, but also, what's this person's personality like? And, I would use it as an opportunity to make the best parts of who you are visible. And so I would shy away from hiding everything entirely, but a more nuanced approach using lists so that you're sharing just certain things with your friends, but then maybe other things you're willing to make public and that an employer might look favorably upon.
If I can follow up with because while you were answering, I thought of something. How do you feel about students that are friends on these social media sites with, their professors or employees who are friends with their employers? I remember my boss asked to friend me, and it was just really uncomfortable. And I have a pretty modest, Facebook account, but for me, it just blurs kind of the public-private line, and not only that, for me, it blurs the distinction you had, when you were a kid of. You had those 8 hours in schools. Those teachers were your teachers. You didn't need to know about their personal lives, and they didn't need to know about yours. It was awkward enough running into them in the supermarket. My God, this person actually has a husband and a life. And I think this is something that the kids that are getting cyberbullied complain about, is that they used to have an escape, at least, that there used to be this clear division between work home or school home, and I'm just kind of wondering how you feel about all of this.
So a few thoughts. It used to be that you'd kind of separate work and kind of your social life with LinkedIn and Facebook. But more and more what's happening is exactly what you described, where an employer will send you a friend request on Facebook. And so first I would say you never have to accept their friend request, but I understand that there's some pressure to do that, right? And so that's again where these lists can go a long way. And so create a work list, and you've got to create those boundaries yourself and decide what you want to share with them and what you don't. And so it takes a little bit more doing, for sure, but it is possible. And then the other thing that I'll mention is that a lot of times for college students, what you'll find is that a senior in college has friends that graduated a year or two above them also, and those are the students who come back and do recruiting. So a lot of times, just to your very first question, one thing I caution students about is remember that your friends who used to be in school with you are now at employers, and a lot of times that's how employers are finding out this additional information.
Now, let me ask you a question about At what stage in young people's lives do they learn this stuff? Is it in junior high school, or sort of what do people learn about these issues in junior high school and then high school and then college? I mean, what kind of learning curve do you see taking place among the folks that you know of?
So this has all developed so rapidly in the past few years that everybody's kind of scrambling to figure out what needs to be taught at which levels. And there's a great organization called Common Sense Media that has put together a curriculum for kind of K through 12. And it's digital citizenship stuff, it's cyberbullying, and it teaches young kids that the internet is different than offline. And what's hard, though, at that age, it's very hard to understand what permanent really means. And that's probably the biggest difference of the internet, is the permanence of it. That, you know, digital storage is incredibly cheap, and stuff can sit on a server for forever and ever, and it will always be accessible somehow for the rest of your life, potentially. And so, you know, students get taught kind of age-appropriate things, and but at the college level, you know, what I obviously advocate for is that students are now at a level where they can understand some of the broader implications and really what I call in the book, become conscious creators of content. And so I think that at each level of education, we need to be educating students about the unique issues that are facing them at that stage in their lives. So for college students, a lot of it is, or older high school students, you know, it's the first time that they're living away from home when they're in college, or that they're having their first sexual relationship, or they're drinking for the first time. And there's a lot of things that happen on a college campus over the 4 years that a student is here that they're just learning for the first time, and that has online implications. And I think that's what I try to address in the book, is kind of how to think about those issues.
Can I ask a question this way, which is, of the students who are here, how much of this stuff have you learned in a classroom where your professors talk about it, and how much have you just picked it up through experience or talking to friends? Does anybody else?
Well, personally, let's see, I've been on Facebook probably since sophomore year of high school, and I think you only realize that because timeline has just come out, and now I'm seeing pictures that I don't want to see from sophomore year of high school. So it's dealing with that. But personally, like, I've grown up with, we had MySpace, and MySpace kind of fizzled out, and we've kind of grown with Facebook and kind of grown with all like the new advances that it's all had. So I think having that, it's been easier to adjust because we're new privacy settings, you've come along and dealt with it. But for people that have just kind of been thrown into it, like I have a cousin who's now a sophomore year of high school trying to deal with this, and she's not learning about it at all. And it's her parents are trying to teach, and it's not something they're being taught. It's just, we don't want you on this right now. You can be on it from this hour to this hour. It's not like social implications or kind of management of what they should be putting out there is not being taught.
Is there a way that you could learn that better in college? Or, I mean, not you, but you know, like college students could learn it better, or is it just best left to individual experimentation rather than
I think you could
Facebook
try.
101?
Yeah, like we have the Annenberg class that I think it's $4.99. It's a social media class. Classes like that kind of teach you the positives of what you can use social media for. So I think if you could bring that down to like a freshman or a sophomore class, it could be really beneficial.
There's a question to that.
I was going to respond to your.
Oh, yeah.
But I was going to say, I think once you start to convey sort of the future implications of it, is when it really hits home in terms of you know, where you're at. Like if I'm a grad student, but when I was an undergrad, and I mean, I'll date myself, but Friendster.
Don't worry about
So,
that.
But you know, as soon as that light bulb, the sooner that light bulb goes off, I think the better. So it's almost like as soon as you can convey to people that there can be some, you know, serious implications in terms of your future success in an employment situation, I think then people really start to look at it differently. I mean, you know.
So I'll throw in that I think one of the challenges is that a lot of times what students rely on are their parents for you know, advice on everything, and you know, a school dance hasn't changed that much from 40 years ago, but for parents, the social media realm is completely new, and a lot of parents are just totally lost. They don't have Facebook accounts themselves, or if they do, they're certainly not interacting with them in the same way that their students are. And it's really hard for parents to kind of get up the learning curve and know what the right things to tell their kids are.
Well, I think that's why I did say I wish I'd had this book when my two boys were younger, because I would have liked to walk through this stuff. But when they were younger, they didn't have Facebook. Yes, Emma.
Just a little comment. Where have you seen those kids or students who are asking and relying on the parents' advice? To your question as well, I believe that everyone is doing this on his or her own, but there may be a couple of observations. I believe this kind of your social presence, and they call it the digital citizenship, in fact it's a question which is of such an importance that you could teach, I mean, maybe in the early stage of the higher education, or even better in K-12, having it in the same package of life skill courses. And I believe it's not less important than earthquake safety kits, which we are teaching here. And second, you know, if mistake has been already made, yeah? So how you handle this? Yeah, you can go this, trying to correct it with the multiplying by 4 or 5 amount of positive information about you. But there is also a old saying, academic saying at least, that we learn from our mistakes more than from the positive experience. And maybe it could be just an idea that you know, there is a web portal and kind of organization which is called Fair, where their slogan is exactly, let's think, analyze, expose, and teach where mistake had been made and how it could be done better. So in this case, I understand that maybe as an analysis or research, it could be that more impressive, more impactful message could be done if some of these cases could be really analyzed.
Yeah.
Sounds like volume 2.
Yeah. Could be. I mean, and I agree.
With the consequences, with all the.
I think when it's personal, it's tough to. I mean, if you can talk about what you've learned, and I guess in a way, this is what I'm doing with. You know, I talk about in the book that Juicy Campus was my LOL OMG experience, where I thought, oh, this will be kind of fun, popular, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster and having impact that I never even anticipated, and so yeah, I mean, I think that taking the opportunity to explain what you've learned and share those learnings with others is a great positive step And there's actually, I was at a talk a couple weeks ago by someone talking about nonprofits, who that's one of the biggest things, is that if nonprofits were more willing to share when they failed, they would be infinitely more effective, but they don't want to share when they fail because then it makes it harder to raise more money.
Well, you can make out of this a good piece, good play,
Yeah, I agree.
Product.
Yeah, no, that's what they'd be contributing to kind of the world knowledge, and everyone,
Of course, we have an intellectual property rights area, but I believe one day will come when they will have also personal property rights area, because now the law is so much behind of the reality that it's not possible. But in fact, it's such an important matter, because companies also are acting as if they were allowed to experiment a lot. For example, you of course know the Harvard Business School, or I don't know which class, which unit of the Harvard University was doing 30 people profiles, which were just kind of graduated group, and during a year or so, and now all 30 are suing the company because so many things were revealed. And so how you would place it in the context of what you were talking about and you are doing?
Let me let this be the last one, because I think we have books, we have books outside that Matt, I think, would be willing to sign. So I want to give an opportunity to that. But why don't you answer this last one?
So I'm not familiar with the Harvard incident, so I'm not sure how to place it within the context of the book. But is there just broadly, I guess, and I'm also not a law expert, but I think that what I hear a lot of times from students is that they anticipate that sometimes the pushback that I'll get is, well, everybody's sharing this stuff, and it'll be fine. And I don't want to work at a company that would judge me based on this picture or that piece of content anyhow. And there's this thinking that eventually it may be that I think is probably right, is that we will all have to have more empathy for one another because we will all have more of our mistakes online. But in the meantime, I think there's a lot of friction between the people who are doing the employing now and the people who are looking for jobs. And that culture clash is impactful and important. And I also think that a lot of times what I tell students is that while they are in this position and thinking like this right now, in a couple years, they may not feel the same way once they're actually having to hire people to work with every day and to get the job done. And they might judge people as being less trustworthy or less productive or whatever the case may be. And so I'm not sure where it's going to shift to exactly. I think there'll be more openness, but I don't know. I think that's a long way before we get to a point where everybody's just totally laissez-faire about their mistakes.
Well, I want to thank Matt for coming, and hopefully we will reduce our own mistakes.
Thank you for having me.